Hello there, this is Al24 breaking news streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our program. The anti-apartheid Archbishop Desmond Tutu dies aged 19. The Nobel laureate, often described as South Africa's moral conscience, died on Boxing Day in Cape Town. Villagers from Myanmar fled across the Thai border on a fighting intensified between Myanmar's military government forces and the anti-junta militia groups. Zionist forces have injured nearly 250 Palestinian protesting, shut down a village in the northern part of the occupied Western Bank. At least 16 asylum seekers died when a smuggling boat carrying them in the Aegean Sea capsized, Greek military officials said. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's headlines. First, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate who helped end apartheid in South Africa, has died at the age of 19. President of Cyril Ramaphosa said that the churchman's death marked another chapter of grief in our nation's farewell to a generation of outstanding South Africans. He added that Archbishop Tutu helped bequeath a liberated South Africa. Hundreds of residents of Flu districts in the southern part of Midway, Myanmar, have fled to Thailand due to continuing clashes between Myanmar army forces and rebels. Myanmar army launched airstrikes and heavy artillery shelling on a small town held by rebels, prompting hundreds of people to flee across the river to Thailand. Hundreds of Palestinians clashed with Zionist troops in an illegal settlements based in the northern West Bank amid rising violence in the area following a deadly terror shooting. The Zionist troops attacked the Palestinian protesting a shutdown imposed by the forces on the entrance to the village of Burak in the area. Marwa Blair.
Over 200 Palestinian protesters were injured when Zionist forces fired live and rubber-coated bullets in the northern occupied West Bank. The Zionists also deployed stun grenades and tear gas containers to disperse the Palestinians. As a result, a total of 247 Palestinians were injured. 8 were injured by live bullets and 35 by rubber-coated bullets during the protests in Burqa village because of calls by Zionist colonists to march the Homesh settlement near Nablus, which was evacuated in 2005. According to the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, at least 10 people among the protesters were hit by live fire from Zionists in the village of Burqa. Also, Palestine's health ministry said that a 17-year-old boy was seriously wounded and taken to the hospital in Nablus. Zionist troops reinforced its presence and sealed off the region in the Nablus-Jenin road to give a safe passage for about 1,000 Zionist colonists to march in the village, triggering protesters from Palestinian residents. The Zionist entity occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip during the Six-Day War in 1967. It later had to withdraw from Gaza but began enforcing an all-out blockade on the territory. The international law views the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as occupied territories and considers all Zionist settlements there as illegal.
The bodies of 16 Kurdish migrants who drowned while crossing the English Channel in November have been repatriated to Iraq, where their families were awaiting them. The victims were among 27 people who perished in the November 24th tragedy, the deadliest disaster since the Channel became a hub for clandestine migrants crossing from France to England. A suicide bomb struck a restaurant in the Democratic Republic of the Congo's eastern city of Beni, killing at least 5 people and himself. The explosion took place at Inbox Bar, where people were celebrating Christmas. According to a security official in Beni, officials blamed the Allied Democratic Forces the attack marks at least violence in a region where Congolese and Ugandan forces have launched a campaign against suspected terrorists. More than 400 people were mistakenly tested negative while actually being positive on Christmas. CIDBATH medical director Professor apologized for the incorrect messaging the 400 patients about the false results. Mariam Zian.
After giving 400 people wrong COVID-19 test results on Christmas Day, CIDBATH medical director Professor Anthony Dodds apologized in a statement and said that the people who were tested negative were actually positive.
Volume of tests that we've been contending with at CIDBATH. Last night we incorrectly messaged 400 patients who had been swabbed at our centres from December the 22nd and December the 23rd. An emergency response team is now investigating the cause of this mistake, which is believed to be due to human error.
St. Vincent's Hospital's spokesperson said that everyone impacted by the mistake was contacted via text Sunday afternoon, and the team is now investigating the incident. The incident comes after New South Wales recorded 6,394 COVID-19 cases, with 458 patients hospitalized and 52 patients in intensive care units. New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard urged people to get vaccinated and said that everyone will get Omicron at some point at a press conference.
Bottom line here is that we would expect that pretty well everybody in New South Wales at some point will get Omicron. We're all going to get Omicron. And if we're all going to get Omicron, the best...
The Omicron coronavirus variant strongly continued its viral march across the U.S. on Christmas Day, throwing May winter holiday celebration into chaos. About 70,000 Americans were hospitalized with COVID-19 as of Christmas evening, according to data from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, an increase of about 2% from last week and about 50% from early November, but around half the peak of January. Health officials have repeatedly warned that the situation may change to worse for tens of millions of Americans that remain unvaccinated. More than 6,000 flights have been cancelled worldwide over the long Christmas weekend and thousands more were delayed, according to tracking website, as the highly infectious Omicron variant brings holiday hurts to millions. According to flightwork.com, nearly 2,800 flights were scrapped around the globe on Saturday, including more than 970 originating from headed to U.S. airports, with more than 8,000 delays as of 1,000.3 GMT on Friday. There were approximately 2,400 cancellations and 11,000 delays, while Sunday cancellations have already surpassed 1,100,000 delay. Vaccination for kids aged 15 years and up and boosters for adults. Prime Minister Modi announced the delivery of COVID-19 jabs for kids and boosters for adults as experts were calling to expand vaccination to combat the new strain of COVID-19. Starting from January, India will provide kids from 15 years old and plus to be vaccinated and booster doses for healthcare workers and people aged 16 and beyond. COVID around the world is still spreading, and our news will always shed light over this latter. More in this paper by Zahar Furjani.
Europe is facing a surge of COVID-19 infections as a wave of the new Omicron variant is increasing. Therefore, some countries tightened their measures and took steps targeting the unvaccinated. Italy further tightened its restrictions, barring the unvaccinated from public spaces and enforcing mask wearing outdoors. Only people with proof of vaccination or of having recovered from COVID-19 can eat at indoor restaurants, go to the movies or attend sporting events. The French have been pouring into testing sites for days as the Christmas vaccination begins. About 6.2 million people, nearly 10% of the entire population, have been tested over the past week. In Germany, where rapid antigen tests have been a way of life for most people throughout the year, there are few enormous queues outside the country's thousands of testing centers, and appointments remain freely available despite the recent introduction in many places of so-called 2G+ rules, which require even vaccinated and recovered people to get tested before entering shops. The British government continues to battle a major rise in COVID-19 cases due to the Omicron variant. On Christmas Day, thousands were reported seen in line to take the booster jab, as the number of the daily new cases remained above the 100,000 mark, making it 3 days in a row. Earlier in December, Greek authorities approved vaccinating children aged 5 to 11 amid the surge in infections. The explosion in cases also prompted Greek lawmakers to approve mandatory COVID-19 vaccination for people over 60 in response to a surge in cases. If they do not get the vaccine by January 16th, they risk being fined €100 for every month they remain unvaccinated.
The Gambia's former leader Yahya Jammeh should face prosecution for torture and rapes, according to a news report by a commission established after the flight into exile 5 years ago. The long-awaited report released last on Friday recommends that a special international court be set up to try Jammeh and others in West Africa, but outside of the Gambia. The commission was set up in January 2017 by President Adama Barrow, whose election in 2016 put an end to more than 20 years of dictatorship. Yahya Jammeh, ex-president of Gambia, found guilty of a series of different crimes, including murdering civilians, torture and rape. The accusation came after the investigation was conducted by the Independent Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, which was set up after former president was exiled due to his rejection for accepting defeat in 2016 election.
A Gambian Truth and Reconciliation Commission reported on Friday that ex-president Yahya Jammeh was responsible for a series of killings, torture and rapes during his 22-year rule over the small country in West Africa. The Independent Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission was established when Jammeh left Gambia for exile in Equatorial Guinea after rejecting to admit defeat in 2016 election. The Commission's report, which follows a 3-year investigation into the crimes of the Jammeh period based on an evidence from many witnesses. It was made public on Friday after it was given to the President Adama Barrow earlier this month. The Commission said that those responsible for those crimes be charged. Neither Jammeh nor his spokesman could be reached for comment. It also said that Jammeh, who led a coup in 1994, and his henchmen, including a personal hit squad known as the Junglas, were responsible for 44 specific crimes against journalists, including Daida Hydra in 2004, ex-soldiers, political opponents, murdering 7 civilians and 59 West African migrants between 2000 and 2005. He also was responsible for the rape of 3 women. In its report, the Commission recommended prosecuting Yahya Jammeh and his coup perpetrators in an internationalized tribunal in a country in the West African sub-region. Amnesty can be given to those who confess their misconduct and express regret and guilt during the TRRC investigation. The application will be finalized within 6 weeks.
Spain officially announced the end of the eruption of the Cambrivija volcano on the island of La Palma after activity that lasted for more than 3 months, during which it caused severe and severe damage. Cambrivija is now hibernating after torrents of lava turned black and solid, and layer of black sand ash covered the area. It will take years, if not a decade, to clean up, rebuild, and reclaim the damaged spaces. The Taliban has dissolved Afghanistan Election Commission, a panel that supervised polls during the previous Western-backed administration. Spokesman Bilal Karimi said on Saturday that there is no need for these commissions to exit the operate, referring to the Independent Election Commission and the Independent Electoral Complaints Commission. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau urged Western countries to unite confronting China and believes that Beijing is working up to strengthen the division in the Western camp. Hussein Burkan.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused China of turning some Western countries against each other, calling for a united front against Beijing to prevent it from using commercial interests to achieve this goal.
China is pushing us to confront each other while competing for access to economic opportunities in the country. A rivalry has erupted between us because we are capitalist democracies trying to improve our situation, especially in light of the extraordinary economic opportunities for the rising level of the Chinese middle class.
Trudeau called for strengthening cooperation between Western countries and forming a strong union between them, so that China cannot divide them and push them to work against each other. Trudeau's comments come in light of fraught relations between the two governments as China detained two Canadians for about 3 years on charges of espionage, while Canada arrested Min Wanzhou, chief financial officer of the Chinese Huawei Telecom Group.
After many delays due to technical issues, the world's most powerful space telescope is ready to blast off on Saturday to its outpost 1 million kilometers beyond the Earth. The James Webb Space Telescope, which has taken 3 decades and billions of dollars to build, will launch from the Korea Space Center.
It took 32 years from the initial concept to the final design. The Ariane 5 rocket will launch in the James Webb Telescope from Guyana on December 25th, 1.5 million kilometers from Earth. The telescope will travel for a month-long journey to reach its far orbit. The world's most powerful space telescope is expected to return with new information that will help scientists in their understanding of the universe's origins and Earth-like planets beyond our solar system. Webb Project co-founder John Mather described the telescope's unprecedented sensitivity on social media. Mather said on his social media site, #James Webb Space Telescope can see the heat signature of a bumblebee at the distance of the moon. In terms of size and sophistication, the telescope is unparalleled. Its mirror has a diameter of 6.5 meters, 3 times that of Hubble's, and is made up of 18 hexagonal pieces. Arianespace, the rocket manufacturer, designed a custom-made decompression system to protect the delicate equipment from pressure changes at that stage. The intricate process will take 2 weeks and must be faultless in order for Webb to work properly. Its orbit will be much farther than Hubble, which has been 600 kilometers above the Earth since 1990. Webb is scheduled to be in service starting from this June.
Pope Francis called for dialogue between families and nations and brought attention to conflicts around the world in his annual Orbi Corbi Christmas message and blessing, a message that has never been seen at this time of the year in this way. Britain's Queen Elizabeth spoke of the loss of her husband, Prince Philip, remembering the mischievous, or let me say the mischievous twinkle in his eyes in an unusual personal Christmas message to the nation.
Although it's a time of great happiness and good cheer for many, Christmas can be hard for those who have lost loved ones. This year especially, I understand why. But for me, in the months since the death of my beloved Philip, I have drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection of the many tributes to his life and work, from around the country, the Commonwealth, and the world. I wish you all a very happy Christmas.
Sudanese security forces fired tear gas to disperse protesters in the capital Khartoum on Saturday as tens of thousands of Sudanese protesters marched across the country. Demonstrators marched to demand civilian rule by restored after the military coup on 25th October, and more than 100 people were injured in clashes with police last week protests. Sudan restricts the internet ahead of planned mass protests Saturday against a military coup as the security forces deployed across Khartoum, blocking key bridges connecting the capital to suburbs.
Khartoum's state governor has warned that security forces will deal with those who break the law and create chaos. Activists who use the internet for organizing recent mass demonstrations had planned the latest in series of street protests for Saturday. 2 months on scene, generals launched their October 25 takeover. Military Chief General Abdullah Fattah al-Burhan held civilian leader Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdouk under effective house arrest for weeks, but reinstated him on November 21. The move alienated many of Hamdouk's pro-democracy supporters, who dismissed it as providing a cloak for legitimacy for Burhan's coup. Protesters online have called for fresh rallies, encouraging supporters with slogans "No negotiations with the army" and demanding the soldiers back to barracks. The bridge connecting Khartoum crossed the Nile River to the cities of Omdurman and North Khartoum were blocked since Friday evening. Security forces also blocked the main street in southern Khartoum, where the protest organizers were planning to hold the demonstrations. Recent protests have seen thousands gather at key government buildings, including outside Parliament, the Presidential Palace, and the Army headquarters.
To a different matter now, the Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen says it struck a Houthi rebel camp in the capital Sana'a as it intensified an aerial bombing campaign against the Iran-backed fighters. The coalition, which backs Yemen's internationally recognized government against the Houthi in the civil war, said it destroyed weapons storehouse in the rebel-held capital, according to official Saudi press agency. Authorities in Burkina Faso have declared a 2-day period of mourning after suspected militant killed at least 41 members of government-backed civilian militia in the country's desert north this week. A column of civilian fighters from the Homeland Defense Volunteers, the FDP, a group that government funds and trains to contain Islamist insurgents, was ambushed on Thursday as it swept a remote area in the northern Lorraine province, authorities said. President Joe Biden came into office with the message America is back, and he promised that diplomacy would replace military power as the main instrument of U.S. foreign policy. His administration has been marked by some important key moments that shape his foreign policy. More in this report.
As 2021 ends, U.S. foreign policy has demonstrated American weakness on the world stage. Biden administration has indeed sought to re-up relations with key allies and position itself as a central player in combating global crises, but has faced criticism for failing to live up to those of a human right leading foreign policy.
We'll stand up for our allies and our friends and oppose attempts by stronger countries to dominate weaker ones.
With a chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan in August, widely seen as the biggest failure of President Joe Biden's administration, withdrawal which was in line with the administration's goal to decrease military engagement in the Middle East, has left Afghanistan in a position where it has an acute humanitarian crisis that could lead to mass famine. The United States has regained leadership on some global challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change, while restoring alliances, resolving trade disputes with European countries, and upgrading partnerships in the Indo-Pacific region through the Quartet Security Dialogue, which includes the United States, Australia, India, and Japan, and the AUKUS initiative of the Trilateral Security Partnership, which includes the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom. America's relationship with its most prominent competitor on international scene, Russia and China, has witnessed many crises that occurred during the Biden period or continued since the Trump era, as managing the strategic competition with Beijing remains the determining framework for the relationship between Washington and Beijing under the Biden administration, which is same key doctrine of the Trump administration.
But we're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs.
As for Russia, Biden attempts to start diplomatic talks with Moscow that has amassed tens of thousands of its forces along the Ukrainian border.
Many people celebrate Christmas with Chinese pine trees, Santa Claus and stockings, but the holiday may take on many different forms around the world. During the pandemic, here's how Christmas was celebrated around the world.
Christmas is one of the most widely known and celebrated festivities in the world. Regardless of geographic location, each culture has its own unique style of commemorating this jubilant end-of-year occasion. Christmas preparations begin in England as early as mid-November. People embellish the area and collect donations for charity from tourists. In Germany, festive Christmas markets may be seen in many cities' main squares, and Christmas trees are put up on Christmas Eve, December 24. People in Australia go to the beach for a barbecue, a loud game of backyard cricket, and a rendition of the White Christmas song. People queued for hours to get tested in New York City, where Omicron has spread rapidly. And many did it as a precaution before flying to see family. Brianna Sultan and her daughter Ava waited in one of the huge lines for a test on Friday. Sultan said after more than 2 hours in line in a New York City Harlem neighborhood that it's a terrible way to be spending Christmas Eve and that it is terrible that we can't see our families because this COVID strain is coming back again. Chocolate stores, farmers markets, and testing centers were packed with Parisians. Despite the fact that deadly COVID-19 infections are at an all-time high and hospitalizations are on the rise in France, the government has refrained from enforcing curfews or closures during the holidays. Fabien Maximovic said that it does affect our enthusiasm to celebrate Christmas. It does make us a bit sad, but at least we're sure not to contaminate or get contaminated. We will all do the test in our family, while she was waiting in a line at a pharmacy in Paris to get tested.
Sport now. The Premier League COVID invasion pushed the English clubs to postpone the Boxing Day's games, which is a new measure to stop this virus. More in this report.
2 Premier League matches and a week of training might have fallen victim to a coronavirus outbreak, but not a second has been wasted in the hands of Rangnick. Areas of improvement have been pinpointed, swift and decisive decisions have followed.
Well, as far as I could see today in training, they're all in good shape. All the players, they did their homework. They all had their schedule to train at home, and all of them just they stick to that schedule and to that program. So from what I saw today in training, I can say most of them, if not all of them, might be available. And of course, I would have to take some difficult decisions: who will be in the squad, who will be in the starting 11.
One of Rangnick's first acts was to bring a sports psychologist to Old Trafford, with Sasha Lindsay, a close confidant during his tenure at Leipzig, joining United's backroom staff. Everton had an initial request to postpone the game rejected on Thursday, despite boss Rafael Benitez claiming he only had 9 outfield players fit. While there have not been further COVID-19 cases at Everton, there has been a number of players unable to train who were originally on the fit list. Canelo became the undisputed super middleweight champion this year, extending his dominant era, and the 4-weight king will now seek a fresh challenge in 2022. Alexander Usyk back at cruiserweight could be the greatest threat to Canelo.
We hope Fraser Clark in 2 or 3 years' time will be part of that. So it's really exciting, the blue ribbon division, isn't it? It's fantastic. But at the moment, Tyson Fury stands as the premier heavyweight. In my opinion, Alexander Usyk, has claimed to be. I think he's one of the best pound-for-pound fighters, no doubt. Top 2, 3.
Canelo can win a world title against Ilunga Makabu, but if Usyk gets back down in weight, then he has already proven himself as undisputed king in that division.
Coming back to Algeria now, on the ground of Habib Bouakal Stadium in Iran. During the 10th round of the Algerian 2nd Division Championship, Sofiane Lokar, 13 years old, breathed his last after falling unconscious in the 35 minutes of the match. According to what was reported by the Algerian news agency, in the 25th minute, Sofiane Lokar collided with the goalkeeper of his team, but Sofiane was able to resume playing thanks to the first aid he received from the medical staff. After Lokar returned to the field in the 35th minute, he fell again alone on the ground, which required the intervention of the medical staff again. Doctors tried to help Sofiane Lokar regain consciousness, but to no avail, and he breathed his last breaths in his way to the hospital. First intervention of the doctors mentioned the heart attack as the direct cause of the death, but on the other hand, the Algerian Football League of Amateurs declared that the head injury that the player had in the first 25 minutes was the main reason. The match referee was forced to stop the game after the first 45 minutes. As a result, what happened? Were all the players on both teams ran a situation, and Mouloudiyat Saida fell down crying when they heard shocking news. Rest in peace, the death of the Algerian player Soufiane Loucard pushed the whole world to react toward the tragic incident, where all the world news channels and the news agencies couldn't pass through without mentioning the death of Soufiane, who reminds the whole world of Eriksen's incident in the last Euro Cup of Nations, where he falls down without moving again, and thanks God, he was saved at the last moment. The football international players of Algeria team all declared their stands with Soufiane family, such as Rais Wahab Mboulhi, Baghdad Bounejah, and even Frank Ribéry, the French player. May he rest in peace. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. That's all for now. Stay tuned for our official edition at 6. Peace.